Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. Over the last few days, we've been talking extensively about how to prepare for this coming bull run, what our prior cycles have looked like, what the current cycle is looking like today. We mapped out the Bitcoin halvings and shared with you guys exactly how our prior cycles have played out in the same sort of ways each and every bull run. Now I wanted to go even deeper, mapping out where our potential cycle top could take us. Going into this next bull run, we've got a couple more years left of this entire cycle, and then we're going to be looking at a major cycle top again. How high is that going to be? Is this going to be a shorter cycle? Is this going to be, it's the same sort of thing that we've seen in years past? And then how do we go about taking profits when it actually happens? I'm going to break it down, so make sure you stay all the way to the end so you don't miss out on any of this exciting information. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are to start off today's video, mapping out what I'm going to be looking at inside of Bitcoin, what I've been preparing for. What we talked about in yesterday's video was the Bitcoin halvings and how each and every time we have one of these halvings, the price of Bitcoin explodes in value. And we've seen that happen every single time we have one of those, going now into our fourth one coming up over here in 2024. So going into this next halving, everybody's kind of wondering if it's going to do the same thing. So far, because we've built this main trend line that resembles all of our prior cycles, I do believe that that's what's going to end up happening to some sort of degree. We don't be surprised if the price ends up pulling back a little bit. We have seen that in some of our halvings. It's just something to understand that big picture usually means there's a lot of price appreciation to be expected on the upside, and we're going to continue to watch for that. Now going into this next cycle, I wanted to actually talk a little bit about more where the all-time high could actually be. Where is the cycle going to top out? What sort of price targets are we going to be looking at? And how are we going to be looking at taking profits most importantly? Now, what we're going to be looking at here, right off the bat, I wanted to go over some statistics to really share with you guys how each cycle has played out from a little bit more of a mathematic point of view. Now, in 2011, the bull run, the very first one that we ever saw, the price, I basically started it out at 1 cent, even though there was a period where you could have basically got Bitcoin for even less than that. But the starting price of Bitcoin at 1 cent with a peak going all the way over here to this high right there was an ROI of 318,000%. So that was the biggest bull run that we ever saw, and that was when it started from all the way down in here and basically became what it is today. Now, when we're looking at the 2013 bull run, this is the starting price of $2, and this is the ending price being $1,242. That's a 62,000% ROI. Now, the 2017 bull run, this one right here, going from $150 all the way up to near $20,000, that's an ROI of over 10,000%. Going into our most recent bull market that we just had, the 2020 to 2021, we were looking at a price return of 2,070%, so a 20x. When we're looking at all of these, we see an obvious trend where each peak all-time high of the cycle ends up decreasing from the last. And that's something we need to understand here, is the fact that over time, as the asset becomes more adopted, it's going to hit a point where as more money comes into it, as the liquidity continues to increase, we're going to ultimately see Bitcoin become more stable. The bull runs are going to stop. And that's why I say that this really could be the last one that we end up seeing that mimics prior cycles, where we have these big sort of bull runs, these massive upswings in price. And I think that that could be playing out in some sort of fashion going into this next bull run. Overall, I don't think that the last cycle, it's hard to compare the last cycle considering we had the pandemic going on, and then they stopped quantitative easing at the exact cycle top. So there was a lot of negative factors that Bitcoin just simply hadn't seen before going into a cycle. And so it's going to be interesting how that plays out into this next bull run now that we don't have so much negative stuff. Like, yeah, there's all the stuff going on in the Middle East, but to me, that's been happening forever, so it's not like we can really get too over ahead of ourselves when we're talking about that sort of stuff. Big picture, We're looking at cycles from a cyclical basis. We're not trying to factor in too much news. I don't like to do that. But, you know, in the last cycle, we did have a global pandemic going on. And the first time that's happened since, you know, forever. In the early 20s, I think, is when it was. Anyways, looking at all of this stuff, big picture, it's looking like we're going to continue to see some sort of diminishing return, considering that's the trend that it's been on up to this point. Now, if we actually look at how much cycle to cycle the ROI has decreased in each one of these. So going from this cycle compared to this cycle here, the ROI decreased 80%. Going from the value from beginning to end here, from beginning to end here, we're looking at an 80% decrease in total ROI that you would have gained. Now, if we're comparing this cycle to this cycle, you would have lost an ROI of 82%. So the ROI diminished comparing this one to this one 80%, over 82% actually. So now if we're comparing the 2017 bull run to this bull run right here, we're looking at a compared ROI loss of over 80% once again. So we have a trend that's developed over each one of our cycles where cycle to cycle, if we're comparing our peak ROI gain from this cycle to this cycle, and this cycle to this cycle, and this cycle to this cycle, and so on, we're looking at over an 80% loss in ROI each and every time. So this is a trend that I don't think people fully understand, simply because most people don't break it down. This is the first time I've ever sat and broke it down before, considering the fact, like, I dropped out of high school. So I did get a GED, but I was locked up in juvenile detention when I got my GED, and I just did it because I knew it would basically get less time on probation. So I was just doing things to basically look good for my judge when I was a kid. And so that's kind of, you know, the extent of my knowledge. In school, I know a lot. Like, I can read really good, I can write, I can do things, I'm pretty smart. I dropped out of high school because I kind of just knew I wasn't going to go to college, and I wanted to do stuff more along the lines of what you see today. So there was a reason behind it, but big picture, I don't have any sort of real math skills, and that was the thing I always struggled with in school. It was the thing that I wish I knew more about, considering it would help me so much more with when it comes more to my investing and stuff. But today I sat down and just kind of, you know, was actually using ChatGPT, and I was just plugging stuff in, asking it questions, and I was able to come to the conclusion that comparing the ROI from cycle to cycle, we see a decrease in over 80% each time. And so going into this next bull run, I figured it would be a good opportunity of breaking down what the heck our cycle ROI is going into the next cycle. And so if we're looking over here, you know, our cycle top was 69,000. And our last bull run had basically a 20x return. So if we're looking and comparing to what we're seeing inside of this next one right here, you know, so far, if we come down and grab the peak low, I don't know what the exact peak low is, so I'm just going to go 15.5. So far, we're up 125%, right? So comparing the last cycle, we went up 2,000%. You know, if we end up seeing another 80% loss decrease from ROI of the last cycle comparing to this cycle, we're going to see a peak somewhere around 4 to 500. So that's going to be a cycle top being 85 to about $100,000 approximately. So if we see this pattern continue to play out where cycle to cycle the ROI lost comparison is 80%, then what we're going to be looking at over here is a cycle top being, you know, $80,000 to $100,000 basically, somewhere inside of that range. Are we going to continue to follow that trend, or is that trend going to end up getting broken? What I've noticed in crypto is there's a lot of trends that get broken long term. The only trend that so far hasn't been broken is the 4-year cycle. When we compare anything else, in my opinion, everything else has failed except for that. So when we're looking at this cycle, even though we have this obvious pattern, it's not like we have to follow it 100%. If we ended up going to, let's say, a 10x from the all-time low to the cycle top, we would be looking at a peak at about $175,000. So that would only be a 51% decrease from the last cycle ROI, right? Because the cycle before us, it was a 20x. So if we go to a 10x, that's only like a 50% decrease. So if we're looking at all of this stuff, we have to keep in mind some of this because it helps us to be able to formulate how high the cycle's going, what are realistic expectations, where should we look to take profit, and all of that sort of stuff. You know, a lot of people are going to be calling for 100K, in the same way that we all kind of called for 100K in the last cycle. And I've always felt like we would probably get it in this one. So 100K is going to put us right at that same threshold for an 80% decrease in comparison to the prior cycle ROI. And at that point, it would follow the same trend. It would be a realistic target to be able to take some profit on. But I think for me, you know, what we've always talked about, guys, and I'm going to go ahead and remove these, so screenshot if you're going to, or pause the video. Anyways, when we're comparing all of this stuff, what we've seen has been the halving comes in and then the peak of the bull run really sets in. And so we're still far away from our halving. In my opinion, we're still undervalued long term. You know, we're only up 125% off the bottom. So if we end up peaking at around 400 to 500%, let's just go with 500% to be more even, we're looking at like $93,500 of a cycle top. So that's why I say that it's important that we're prepared early for these things. And I understand that it's hard considering there's emotions attached to this stuff. When the market's going down, when it's breaking down, especially if you bought up in here in sort of anything, you know, it's a scary time to have to go through that. I understand 100%. But it's in these moments when we see the market trending up that we start to realize that, you know, we should have taken it more seriously when we were at these low point evaluations. Now, big picture, if we're looking at this sort of a thing, I want you guys to keep in mind that, you know, we only have about 75%, a little bit less than that, maybe 65, 70% left until we're at that valuation. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see this trend actually break. If we see a cycle that's a lot more, you know, important, a lot more adoption takes place, something a lot more media driven like what we saw with 2017, then we can, you know, just break this pattern and it doesn't have to follow. I'm just helping us to have realistic expectations going into it, considering the fact there is an obvious trend that has formed over each of the last cycles. Now, the big thing I want you guys to remember when it comes to taking profits is the 4-year cycles. So we're going to go through here and we're going to look at the major cycle lows of all of these. We're going to make just this a normal line. We're going to make them red. So each one of these are going to be our 4-year cycle lows going into each and every one of our bull runs, because I think that this is the best way we can take profits. We know how the Bitcoin halving lines up. We know how we can make profit there. We know that we're still before our Bitcoin halving. But the thing I want you guys to remember here is the 4-year cycle lows, because these happen much more consistently than anything else I've ever seen. The only thing that's changed is the fact that this first cycle in here, it was only 3.2 years bottom to bottom, whereas all the rest of them were syncing up with 4 years, which is what we need to see here in a true 4-year cycle. You measure peak low of the cycle to peak low of the cycle, because this shows the entire uptrend from beginning to end, right? And then that's the new uptrend in its place. So we repeat this pattern. 1,450 days is 4 years. This was 1,428 days from bottom to bottom. The bottom in 2018 to the bottom that we just saw with FTX collapse was the exact same thing, being 1,428 days. So what we see here are the most consistent of trends inside of the market. And this is why I always tell us that it's more important to factor in the 4-year cycles over the Bitcoin halvings, although we do see a trend with the Bitcoin halvings. Once we're to the point of breaking the all-time highs, that's when the Bitcoin halving happens. It's all been the same there. But the true opportunity to buy is understanding when the 4-year cycle low is coming in. And it was perfect with the FTX collapse, being almost exactly 4 years from our last cycle low. So to see that capitulation come in there, you know, it wasn't surprising to me. It wasn't surprising to anybody that was watching 4-year cycles. In fact, that was a major buy opportunity long term. So to see us trending outside of that, it puts us in the exact same territory as all of our prior cycles going into our next Bitcoin halving. So where is our cycle top going to be? be in all of this? How does that come into play? And I think a lot of that is going to end up being factored in how well this cycle performs in comparison to the last one. Because of the fact that we had the pandemic in the last cycle, we might end up seeing that pattern of the ROI diminishing at 80% in comparison cycle to cycle. We might see that end up being broken just simply because this cycle has more power to have upside, considering we don't have a pandemic going on. So if we end up seeing that play out, and the market goes upwards of $250,000 per Bitcoin, or even $200,000 per Bitcoin, it would only have to go up to a 10x to already break the pattern significantly. And so that would put us at about $175,000 per Bitcoin. And I think that's a more than reasonable target going into the next bull run. But it all depends on how much media attention this cycle gets in comparison with prior ones. What we've never really seen with Bitcoin is Bitcoin getting a significant amount of media attention. We've seen little things here and there, little games. Elon Musk played around with Dogecoin a little bit. But we haven't truly seen any sort of real internet bubble in comparison to the internet bubble, right? What we saw with the internet bubble was a peak mania phase that was there was really nothing in comparison. Nothing had seen it like its time. And so going into this next bull run, I believe that crypto is going to do the same sort of thing. I do think it really could be in this bull run. I'm not going to say 100% because I don't know. Nobody really knows. But I'd say that we're at a point of adoption that we just can't compare in any sort of prior cycles. We have more institutional involvement than ever before, and there's way more reason why this cycle could be the one that actually takes it. Well, I mean, everybody's talking about the Bitcoin ETF. The second BlackRock or the second some big institutional bank gets a hold of that, gets it to pass through Congress, it's kind of game over at that point. I don't think anything else is going to happen. I think that could be the last true major bull run that we end up seeing long term. I'm not going to say that we can't have big highs and lows, but the thing that I'm expecting is the 4-year cycle, this obvious pattern that we've been seeing specifically over the last 10 years. I don't know if that's going to continue to play out in the same way. Now, what we're going to be looking at, though, going into the cycle top, what we end up seeing inside of these cycles is from bottom to bottom, it's 4 years, but from top to top, it's about 3, right? So inside of this first cycle, this one was a little bit shorter considering it was only 3.2 years bottom to bottom. So the top was ending up being a little bit shorter as well. But with this one over here, we're looking at about exactly 3 years from the bottom of the cycle to the top of the cycle, right? And then once again over in here, it was the same sort of thing considering we had the exact same time frames. About 1,060 days, 1,070 days, depending on where you end up drawing that. So it's 3 years, right? And so if we're looking at 3 years from our cycle low, we're looking at 1,060 days approximately, which is basically putting us at November, December, January, maybe even October, depending if we have a shorter cycle. We're looking at the end of the year 2025 as being our major cycle top. So I think that that's the big thing that we're looking at long term. If you're looking at where you're going to be taking profits, you want to just go with the end of the year. And we're going to make this, let's make it, you can't really see that. We're going to make it gold. We're going to make it bigger. We're going to make it gold because this is financial freedom over here. Somewhere where Bitcoin goes all the way up to like 200K. That'd be the ideal scenario. 200K end of year 2025, that's going to put us in the same sort of trajectory as all of our prior cycles. And we can see that trend has been playing out up to this point. In comparison with all of these, cycle bottom, halving comes in, price takes off, bear market, bottom of the 4-year cycle low. Then we do the exact same thing. Halving, real bull market takes off, bear market, 4-year cycle low. Same thing happens here, beginning of the uptrend. We get the halving, real parabolic move takes off. Then we get the bear market. Then that's the bottom of the 4-year cycle low. So this cycle going into it, it's all relatively the same sort of thing. We bottomed at the end of the year, followed the same 4-year cycle like we always have. We're still before the halving, so that's why I say it's still, a good buying opportunity. Because if we don't follow this pattern, let's assume we go up to 48,500, come back correct, consolidate here on this main trend line for a while. Then once that real bull trend kicks off and we start getting up at that major, topping point, Who knows exactly how crazy it gets, but the crazier it gets because of the institutional involvement, don't be surprised if this ends up surpassing a lot of people's expectations and ends up performing in a lot greater way. The big thing that I'm looking for is the cycle top being the end of the year, 2025, somewhere in there. I think that we're going to continue to maintain this uptrend until we get closer towards the end of the year 2024, somewhere around that point, as the real breaking out period for the market. So anyways, guys, this is the video I had for you. If you found value in it, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these updates. If you guys want to see what I'm investing in, what I'm putting my money in, which altcoins I'm buying long term, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up for my Discord server. It's a private group, lifetime access, one-time payment. As long as you guys are in there, you're going to see everything I'm buying and investing in, even if it's outside of the crypto markets, stocks, anything like that. I'm always looking inside of other opportunities, and if you guys want to know what I'm doing, all of it's going to be taught in there. So to go and sign up, website linked is below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for supporting this channel. It really means a lot. Super excited to be back in the routine of uploading a lot more, and so we're going to continue to pump these videos out for you guys. Thank you all so much, and with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.